Hello, synth heads, and welcome to episode 3 of Talking Synths. I'm Sam Mims from Syntaur.
And I'm Carlos Morales.
And we're going to talk some synths, about synths. Happy Halloween, everybody. Coming up tomorrow. What you going to dress up like?
John Carpenter playing an SQ80. I'm just going to go door to door.
All right, sounds good. All right, let's get to some questions and some comments. The first one from our Talking Synths at syntaur.com email, Kalpana Singh says, I can create you a custom designed website. Oh my God. The spam comes early, doesn't it? We just created this email address and we're getting spammed already. Kalpa, thanks for looking out for us, but no thanks. Now, on to some real questions.
Alrighty, and just remember, if any of you guys out there have questions, what was that email again that they can email us at?
That email again was talkingsynths at syntaur.com.
Yeah, we really look forward to reading your questions.
As long as it's not spam.
Yeah.
Yeah, questions or suggested topics. Can you guys talk about blah, 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 whatever?
We're happy to hear it.
Yeah, indeed.
Alrighty, first question. Who does this? I'm not sure who this one comes from, but
yeah, it's just a real common thing we get.
Very common.
My floppy drive is not reading the disks. Do I need a new drive or do I need a new disk? It's a good conversation to have, yeah. I think. And there are two obvious culprits: the disk or the drive. Let's talk about disks first. Mm-hmm. For one thing, they're no longer manufactured, I think. Is that correct? No more disks anywhere?
No one's really making new disks. So anytime that you are buying new in-box disks, they've probably sat for a lengthy period of time. I think it's just getting to be, the world stock is becoming older and older and more susceptible to the erosion of time.
Yeah, and so floppy disks don't last forever, mm-hmm. especially if you store a box of them with your favorite data in your garage next to your horseshoe magnet collection, or next to a speaker or something magnetic.
Non-temperature controlled, susceptible to humidity.
That can corrode your floppy disks.
Definitely.
And once the data starts going, the disk drive might not read it. But if you don't know if it's your disk or your drive and you're really in a pinch, what has actually saved my butt a few times is dust can build up inside the floppy drive, and that can prevent the heads from reading correctly. And so what you can do, I have a drive here, you can just flip that little door up. I can't do it too well with my finger, but use a little screwdriver or a pen or something, and then just give a blast of air in there. That can dislodge any dust bunnies or whatever is inside there, and I have had that work. And disk wouldn't load. Give a quick blow in there, and then you can continue your session or your gig. Could be the drive is bad. It's a real hard thing to tell when someone says, "Is it my disk or is it my drive?" Because the really the way to get to the bottom of that is to have a known good disk and put it in, mm-hmm. or have a known good drive. But I did want to just share the squirt some air. You don't have to blow in there with your mouth. You can use compressed air or whatever, because you sure don't want to spit inside there. So.
You're gonna give it some mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
Yeah, and in these COVID days, you don't want to give your drive COVID, so compressed air might be better.
Yeah. All right, next question. Another common point of failure: panel buttons and tact switches. Once again, anything that'll see a lot of use, just wear from over time. And we actually have a panel here so we can kind of show you what these tact switches look like. They are going to vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. But anytime you notice that, patch save is probably a real common one, mm-hmm. And it's just not being as responsive, and then you push on it, and then the menu will come up, probably have a tact switch that's going out.
Right, and the way these are usually configured, if you can see these white things here, those are the tact switches, and the plastic button sits over those, and a lot of times the plastic button will be either mounted to the circuit board or it'll be mounted to the panel that gets all closed up with it. In any case, you press on the plastic button presses on the tact switch makes the contact. So if you're not getting contact, it's most likely a worn out tact switch. It's, you know, a $2 part or something, or dollar or whatever. They're real cheap. And these just have 2 solder pins on them. Some of them have 4. It's a really simple job to desolder one, put another one in its place. The hardest part of the whole operation is probably getting to the panel board, because, you know, depending on the keyboard, you got to take a lot of stuff apart.
And so an easy way to test that, because I've had this happen before where I'm trying to repair a synth, is you can actually take a digital multimeter and you can put your leads on the 2 contacts and press that tact switch down. And if it's making contact, it'll beep.
Right.
You know, because I've actually happened this before where I think it's the tact switch that's broken, I replace it, and then I go and I push the button and it's still not working. And I've put the synth all the way back together and it's like, oopsie, that's a brand new tact switch. I know it has to work. And then disassembling it, you know, it's kind of a pain in the butt. But then you really want to be cognizant and really just keep an eye on things. So in those cases, in one instance, it was actually a broken trace. And I mean, it was just the smallest little tear and trace. So the tact switch was totally fine. It just wasn't setting signal. And then another time, so something to be aware of is if it's groups of tact switches that are out. So I was working on a DX7 once, and my first 4 buttons on the 2 rows, so it was like 1 and 2 and 17 and 18, weren't working. I replaced those tact switches, put the unit back together. They still weren't working. But the fact that it was a group should have been a red flag. What it ended up being was a loose ribbon cable. So
ribbon cable.
Yeah, something as simple as just plugging it back in,
Yeah.
brought it back to life.
Yeah.
And it, you know, and then I didn't need those parts.
Yeah. You talked about the meter beeping.
Yeah.
A lot of people sometimes ask, you know, what tools do I need to start, you know, messing with my synths? A meter or continuity tester that actually beeps when it makes contact between 2 points, that is a wonderful thing to have.
Yeah.
I think not all multimeters have that beeping function, but if you know, it's great for testing, does this point really connect to this point like it's supposed to? And you just put the leads on there and you get beep, and then you know you're good. No beep, you know you're bad.
Yeah, and just a little note on multimeters, you know, it doesn't have to be the nicest, newest, most expensive multimeter. I kind of went out of my way to get a really nice one that had an oscilloscope built into it, because they're fairly inexpensive. I spent maybe $100 on it. And for the life of me, the continuity tester on it, when it beeps, it barely beeps. And you can barely hear it, and it drives me crazy. And we have, you know, a fairly cheaper model that we use here in-house to repair synths. And I like the way it beeps, because when you have continuity, it's loud.
Yeah.
And you don't have to question it. So you don't get caught up in, oh, I have to have the biggest, best multimeter. You know?
Well, if yours has that many features, does it have a line out that you can then plug the beeper in?
right, an auxiliary cord or Bluetooth for your continuity tester. It's a $1 million idea.
All right, let's take on one other question that we get a lot of people asking about, the CS80. We did a CS80 episode on Synth Wizards. It's been the most popular episode we've done, and a lot of people want to know, what became of the CS80? Did you sell it? How much did you sell it for? And then we had one on Reverb, and a lot of people asked again. Well, the stories, the one that we did in our Synth Wizards episode actually ended up with Ron, our technician. Went to a good home, and it felt nice to keep it in the family.
Definitely.
And then there was a second one right after that CS80 episode came out. We got a call from someone who said, I have a CS80 and I haven't used it in decades, and it's sat in my house basically unused kind of since it was new.
It was basically the equivalent of a barn find.
Yeah,
is what I would say. Showroom condition. Mint.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And then the other amazing thing was it was right down the road.
Yeah.
We went on a drive, and we were out in the country thinking, there's a CS80 out here, and then we came on up on this neighborhood, and it was an amazing
it just made me think, like, I wonder what else is out here in this vast expanse of hill country.
Yeah.
You know, like, what else do people have in their garages that are not?
That was a fun day, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was.
To not only find the CS80, but we got some other stuff with it, and the guy was really a great guy to deal with and to know, and he had all this cool stuff, and I guess what was really cool about that was he knew he had something special there, and he knew he wasn't using it, and
wanted it to go to a good home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wanted it to get it in the hands of someone who really would put it to good use. And we did sell that one on Reverb, and it went to a EDM producer in
Where was that?
I was going to say Baltimore. It was in Maryland. I can't remember the exact city off the top of my head, but it is in good hands, and it's making good music now. So happy ending to that story.
Yeah.
And people also ask, oh, how much did you sell it for? How much did you buy it for? And all that. We kind of keep that under wraps because it's not just us involved, it's the other people, and we want to respect people's privacy. So
definitely.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a cool couple of stories.
Can't wait till the next CS80 passes through.
Yeah. We had 2 CS80s in the showroom for a while there, so that was pretty remarkable in itself.
CS160.
Yeah. All right, you want to take one?
Yeah, sure. Stephen Liberali.
Stefano
Liberali. Can you kind of basically explain some of the differences between synthesizers and manufacturers and their sounds?
What makes a Moog sound different from a Roland, for example? We sort of took that on in a previous episode, but I thought it'd be fun to dive a little deeper into it. We talked about filters before. The Moog filter is definitely a unique filter. Roland has its own unique filter. Oberheim has their own unique filter sound. Yamaha. So that's certainly a big part of it. The other thing that came to mind for me, though, was voice architecture. If you have multiple oscillators as opposed to one, that's really going to make the difference.
Your ability to detune and,
right.
and create a little bit of separation and space between the two.
Yeah, a mini Moog versus one oscillator synthesizer, for instance. You don't get that fatness in the one oscillator that you would with a mini Moog. But also things like, does it have a high pass and a low pass filter? Or some synthesizers have real snappy envelopes where you can get just the tightest attack and really make some percussive sounds. Others are a little more flowy and they lend themselves better to pad type or more lyrical
think
sounds.
Our architecture is definitely a very important part of that, and I think a really good example of that would be the MS-20 and the MS-10. Here are 2 synthesizers from the same manufacturer. They share the same filter chip, the K35.
These are Korg mono synths from the early 80s, I guess?
Yeah, maybe late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
And so even within, doing the production in-house, that little bit difference in architecture really changes the sounds that they produce. The MS-10 not having the high-pass filter actually enables it to get a little bit more of that juicy low end that everyone likes. And so just having a different interface and a different architecture, even within the same company, it kind of shows you how important that is.
Yeah, true. And
kind of talking about filters, I was really surprised how restrained the CS80 filter was. When you think like an MS-10, MS-20, the resonance, it's squelching and it's in your face.
Yeah, really aggressive.
And when I was messing with the CS80, it was definitely a lot gentler.
Yes.
And I kind of wasn't expecting that. I was like, is this working? Is this?
It has a much narrower range, but to me the CS80 is so musical. They kind of dial it into the really musical range, and then you have a wider range within that. And the coolest thing to me on the CS80 was getting resonant sounds using the high pass and low pass filters, both resonant, and then just changing those cutoff frequencies while you're playing, and it's really sweet.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of it is implementation, and as far as how is that user interface, how is that going to affect the way that you sculpt a sound? It'll pull you in one direction opposed to another.
Yeah.
I've been having a lot of fun recently with a K3, a Kawai K3, and it always seems to pull me into this same corner of really glassy, luscious pads.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll come in with this sort of like, because I know it's good at making brass patches, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make a brass patch, and give it 20 minutes, and then I'm right back there where it's pulling me.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a lot of it is interface and the way it's set up and the architecture and technology.
Do you like pad sounds in general? Because when you're saying that,
Yeah.
I find myself always getting pulled into that realm, and it's just because I'm a sucker for a good luscious stereo pad.
And then
with
once
some
you have
motion.
the headphones on, it's
Yeah.
very easy to get lost in that realm.
So are you the same way as,
Yeah,
as
I
me,
think so.
or is it
I think
more
so.
the synthesizer pulling you in on that?
Maybe a little bit of both. Something about the K3 and those filters, especially when you put like a nice sawtooth LFO, and you kind of get this echo-ish reverb and the chorus. I know it's completely capable of wonderful heavy-duty basses, but it's once you start hitting those big open chords,
Yeah.
and then you start going down that path again.
Yeah. I guess that's true. Certain synthesizers pull you in certain directions.
Yeah.
I mean, Mini Moog pulls me into the bass sounds. I'm always doing bass on it, and I love putting that third oscillator tuned up a fifth, and
really riding the filter.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there's another really good example of that user interface, because what if it didn't have that big knob? You know, what if it was a little bit restrained? Would you still have the tendency to ride the filter like that?
No.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be able to.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah, that really is a good point. All right. We had a question from Brian Nixon that's really specific, but it sort of brings up an interesting thing. He says, can you tell me anything about the DEXP 1000 demo board for the MR, the InSonic MR series? And he looked for information online and couldn't find anything. This is something that I think he found on an auction site. And basically, I didn't find anything either, but what I think that is a where the manufacturer made like just a handful of these, sent them out to their sales reps, and they could go into the stores and do demos with them. And I was around for a lot of that back in the early days of InSonic, and knew a lot of those people, so I have some Mirage discs that were in-store demo kind of things, and ASR discs like that. So they were, specialized things that the factory put out there so that people could do specific, really cool demos with their machines.
Showcase it and show you what the machine was capable of.
Yeah.
Kind of like a sales package.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a curiosity these days to have one. I don't know how useful it will be, but it is sort of a nice little piece of history, and there are not many of them out there. So.
That reminds me of, once again, back to the MS-20, how they had the educational series. Another kind of really weird, rare thing. But Korg really wanted to teach synthesis in schools, so there was a limited release of MS-20s that are giant, and they're made to go.
That's right.
They're made to go mounted on the wall. Yeah, I think we need one for the showroom.
We could fit one in here.
Yeah.
I think there were some Rhodes pianos like that too, and maybe Wurlitzers that were educational, and they had funky colors instead of black and whatnot. So. Yeah, cool little bits of history.
Yeah. Trevor Levine.
No, Trevor Langevin?
Langevin. I'm terrible at pronouncing names.
I don't know. Sorry, Trevor.
Yeah. Many synths now contain unobtainium parts, such as microchips and other things. Do you have a top 10 or top 100 list? And I think really what this question is highlighting, and we've talked about this before, is just the wonderful period in time that we live in when it comes to synthesizers and synthesis in general, because we're seeing this resurgence of the vintage synth market. I know there was a period in time where if you had a SEM chip that went out or an SSM, you were kind of out of luck unless you had to harvest that from another non-functioning unit.
Yeah, 10 years ago, your CEM chip dies, and it's like, find something else to pull one out of. So.
Yeah, but we've seen a resurgence of this, and now people are starting to manufacture those parts that were once unobtainium and really bringing a lot of these machines back to life and putting them in the hands of creators, which I think is fantastic. Yeah,
so you can get SSM chips now. There are a couple of different companies kind of rejuvenating those vintage synths on a chip, or the vintage filters or envelope generators.
Analog Renaissance is another one.
Yeah.
We carry a lot of, what are they, the gravitational slingshots and the Juno 106
Yeah.
chips.
And we now have replacements for the MN 3009 Bucket Brigade delay chips, the BBD chips that are kind of the heart and soul of like the Roland Juno 106 chorus effect. And they're used in lots of things that have choruses and a lot of the Boss pedals and stuff. And those chips would start to go out, the chorus would get real noisy or stop working, and then can't get them.
What I'm really excited about are those custom Yamaha IC chips.
Yeah, we just started carrying. A guy basically reproduced a chip that's used in the CS80.
Yeah, and it's really awesome when you see someone that has that amount of passion for something, that he's like, I'm going to take the spare time that I have in my day to devote to this maybe obscure synth that not a whole lot of people know about, but it has this weak point or this failure, and I'm going to help bring that back to the masses.
Yeah, it really warms our synthesizer hearts, doesn't it?
And then another thing that's really exciting about that is that now that these chips are available, you're seeing them come out in like the Eurorack format, and those chips that were once unobtainium are now being adapted to whole new circuit designs.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, wonderful time to be alive in the world of synthesis.
Yeah, indeed. Let's talk a minute. We get several. Well, we kind of touched on this before, and a lot of people chimed in about underrated synths. And you and I were talking before we cranked it up here, because this is such a renaissance time in the synthesizer world. I'm not sure anything is underrated anymore, because there are people out there on the internet that are raving about how cool this synth is or the other. So maybe we should change the term to undervalued, or
bang for your buck.
Yeah, bang for your buck. That's what it was. So we mentioned a couple of favorites before. One that I brought up was the JX8P, and you brought up the K3, the
Quiet K3. Yeah. So just kind of expanding on that. So this was kind of a debate that Sam and I were having before the podcast, because I kind of brought up string machines, and was like, well, is that a synthesizer? And are they underrated? And are they are unknown? Because you say string machines and people automatically think that the ARP Solina.
Yeah.
And they have been used on some really awesome songs. But for me, the Krumar Performer, Krumar Orchestrator.
I love those.
Yeah, they just have such a wonderful, not only warm, but they can do the grit in the bass end. And I'm really surprised, because it's not even really what you would think as a traditional mono synth. And so I wonder, kind of when we talked about the CS80 sitting in someone's home unused, I wonder how many string machines there are out there unused, people that wanted to maybe play in their church on the home organ, and they got kind of tucked away. I'd like to see a resurgence in that,
Well, you may.
Yeah.
Speaking of Krumar, I remember way back in the dusty recesses of my mind, we were playing a gig once back in the 70s, and a competing band, I think it was a showcase or something for a booking agent. The competing band was using an orchestrator on the stage, and the guy was playing the strings, and I thought, man, those sound good. And then he hit that pedal and crossfaded those strings and brought the brass in, and I just fell apart. It's like, oh man,
like we lost.
That sounded so good. So they sounded really good back then, and they sound really good now. I love the Performers. They're great little string machines. One that came to my mind was the InSonic Mirage. You can still get those cheap. I can't think of another keyboard out there that has so much unique character to it that you can get for so little money. And now if you get it to be a sampler, if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to sample stuff on it, you're going to be pulling your hair out, and it's not going to be great. But if you can get a Mirage with a bunch of discs, man, they just have such a really cool character to them. And I kind of take that back. If you're just doing one-shot sounds on it, drum, percussion kind of stuff, that's not too terrible to do. But if you're doing sounds where you have to loop it and make it sound really realistic and seamless loops and stuff, I get something else for that. But they just have such a really cool character with the analog filters on them.
Yeah. Underrated, speaking of underrated, there's one more I just wanted to throw in there real quick because I had such a blast with it over the past weekend. I only had it for a day, but it was the Novation Base Station. The Base Station 2. I had seen some online reviews and I was kind of tepid about it. And then when I actually had it, you know, on my hands and navigating it, once again talking about UI, everything was so clearly laid out and so easily accessible. It was really quick to sculpt sounds and really, really great sounds. I think that will be a modern day classic.
Yeah.
And affordable.
Yeah.
And affordable.
Cool. Well, let's get into new stuff. And I was just going to tell a quick segue story for this because some of the new stuff is Moog related. And I'm a big Moog fan. The first synthesizer I ever bought was a Moog Satellite. The most basic thing you can get. A few presets, and then you can change the filter up a little bit, and that's about it. But I was sure proud of that thing, and it was the only thing I had that was a synthesizer. I had that and I think a Univox compact piano, so it was pretty dismal sounding rig. But the Satellite, you know, I was sure proud of. We were doing a gig in New Orleans. Our sound guy had to unload some stuff from the truck, so he took some stuff out to get to whatever he needed, packed the stuff back in the truck, closed it, got in the truck, backed up, realized that he forgot to load my Moog Satellite back in, and he had just run over the top octave of it with the truck. This was right before our gig, so I got a screwdriver, pried up the keys that were mashed down and stuck, and I played it on the gig that night.
Wow.
So
I think that's a really a testament to the Moog quality.
Yeah.
Run it over with the van and still be able to play it.
Yeah, I was amazed. And so for new stuff, Moog has the Clairvox out, Clairvox Centennial, which is a theremin, right?
Yeah, it's a celebration of the 100th year anniversary, so the centennial of the theremin. And I was kind of quickly going over the specs of it, and I was really surprised at the things that they included in it. So not only is it a traditional 2-oscillator analog synth, but they also included a digital or VA section that includes wavetable synthesis.
Oh, wow.
So I'm gonna be really excited to hear how people use this to create. There's a local band out of here called Octopus Project, and the lead singer, she plays a theremin, and she can rock it.
Yeah,
so,
well, if you got 8 hands, you could probably do wonders with a theremin.
Right? She needs 8 Clairvoxes. But yeah, so and they really nailed the design on it. It has this really cool, elegant look to it.
Nice, yeah. So that's cool. And then another Moog thing is we now have the Moog Matriarch Dark in our showroom, and yeah, it's pretty sweet looking. The Matriarch Not Dark model looks pretty sweet and sounds amazing, and so the Dark model is going to give you that classic look and sound great too.
Yeah, and it's funny having the two next to each other. Can't help me think of the MG1 and then a Rogue. Is kind of what they look like to me.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause the MG1 kind of had those funky colors too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and then just one more new thing I wanted to bring up. We now have Syntaur hoodies available on our website. And so you can fix yourself up with the new Syntaur Winter Ensemble. So yeah, those are cool, and they're nice and snuggly as the winter comes upon us. And yeah, I think that's it for the new stuff, and that's it for another episode of Talking Synths. So with that, modulator.